Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today, we are presenting a tribute to Louise Glück. This is Bob Beitcher's idea. The magnificent readers in order of appearance are Bob Beitcher, who will introduce the program and then read, then Helen Richman, Corinne Conley, Kay Weissman, Ruth Elliott. Here's Bob Beitcher.
Thank you, Harry. I asked Harry if he could add this session to his lineup to recognize Louise Glück, who passed away on October 13th at her home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We had previously read Louise's poetry on one of Harry's shows a few years ago, I think, but this moment marked by her death was special. And Louise Glück was very special. In her lifetime of deeply personal work and poetry, she won Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Award, and in 2020, the Nobel Prize for Literature, the first American, by the way, since it was awarded to T.S. Eliot in 1948. She served as the U.S. Poet Laureate from 2003 to 2004. In her lifetime, she published 14 books of poetry. Today, we'll hear a small selection of them. I hope you appreciate her work. Early December in Croton-on-Hudson. Spiked sun. The Hudson's whittled down by ice. I hear the bone dice of blown gravel clicking. Bone pale, the recent snow fastens like fur to the river. Standstill. We were leaving to deliver Christmas presents when the tire blew last year. Above the dead valves, pines pared down by a storm stood, limbs bared. I want you. Matins. I see it is with you as with the birches. I am not to speak to you in the personal way. Much has passed between us. Or was it always on the one side? I am at fault. At fault. I ask you to be human. I am no needier than other people, but the absence of all feeling, of the least concern for me. I might as well go on addressing the birches, as in my former life. Let them do their worst. Let them bury me with the romantics, their pointed yellow leaves falling and covering me. Sirens. I became a criminal when I fell in love. Before that, I was a waitress. I didn't want to go to Chicago with you. I wanted to marry you. I wanted your wife to suffer. I wanted her life to be like a play in which all the parts are sad parts. Does a good person think this way? I deserve credit for my courage. I sat in the dark on your front porch. Everything was clear to me. If your wife wouldn't let you go, that proves she didn't love you. If she loved you, wouldn't she want you to be happy? I think now, if I felt less, I would be a better person. I was a good waitress. I could carry 8 drinks. I used to tell you my dreams. Last night, I saw a woman sitting in a dark bus. In the dream, she's weeping. The bus she's on is moving away. With one hand, she's waving. The other strokes an egg carton full of babies. The dream doesn't rescue the maiden. Theory of memory. Long, long ago, before I was a tormented artist, afflicted with longing yet incapable of forming durable attachments, long before this, I was a glorious ruler uniting all of a divided country. So I was told by a fortune teller who examined my palm. Great things, she said, are ahead of you. Or perhaps behind you. It is difficult to be sure. And yet, she added, what is the difference? Right now, you are a child holding hands with a fortune teller. All the rest is hypothesis and dream. Song. Leo Cruz makes the most beautiful white bowls. I think I must get some to you, but how is the question in these times? He is teaching me the names of the desert grasses. I have a book, since to see the grasses is impossible. Leo thinks the things man makes are more beautiful than what exists in nature. And I say no. And Leo says, wait and see. We make plans to walk the trails together. When I ask him, when, never again. That is what we do not say. He is teaching me to live in imagination. A cold wind blows as I cross the desert. I can see his house in the distance. Smoke is coming from the chimney. That is the kiln, I think. Only Leo makes porcelain in the desert. Ah, he says, you are dreaming again. And then I say, I'm glad I dream, and the fire is still alive. Thank you.
Afterward. Reading what I have just written, I now believe I stopped precipitously, so that my story seems to have been slightly distorted, ending as it did, not abruptly, but in a kind of artificial mist of the sort sprayed onto stages to allow for difficult set changes. Why did I stop? Did some instinct discern a shape, the artist in me intervening to stop traffic, as it were? A shape, or fate, as the poets say, intuited in those few long ago hours. I must have thought so once, and yet I dislike the term, which seems to me a crutch, a phase, the adolescence of the mind, perhaps. Still, it was a term I used myself frequently to explain my failures. Fate, destiny, whose designs and warnings now seem to me simply local symmetries, metonymic baubles within immense confusion. Chaos was what I saw. My brush froze. I could not paint it. Darkness, silence, that was the feeling. What did we call it then? A crisis of vision, corresponding, I believe, to the tree that confronted my parents. But whereas they were forced forward into the obstacle, I retreated or fled. Mist covered the stage, my life. Characters came and went. Costumes were changed. My brush hand moved side to side, far from the canvas, side to side like a windshield wiper. Surely this was the desert, the dark night. In reality, a crowded street in London, the tourists waving their colored maps. One speaks a word, I. Out of this stream, the great forms, I took a deep breath. And it came to me the person who drew that breath was not the person in my story. His childish hand confidently wielding the crayon. Had I been that person? A child, but also an explorer, to whom the path is suddenly clear, for whom the vegetation parts, and beyond, no longer screened from view, that exalted solitude Kant perhaps experienced on his way to the bridges. We share a birthday. Outside, the festive streets were strung in late January with exhausted Christmas lights. A woman leaned against her lover's shoulder, singing Jacques Brel in her thin soprano. Bravo, the door is shut. Now nothing escapes, nothing enters. I hadn't moved. I felt the desert stretching ahead, stretching, it now seems, on all sides, shifting as I speak, so that I was constantly face to face with blankness, that stepchild of the sublime, which it turns out has been both my subject and my medium. What would my twin have said had my thoughts reached him? Perhaps he would have said, in my case, there was no obstacle for the sake of argument, after which I would have been referred to religion, the cemetery where questions of faith are answered. The mist had cleared. The empty canvases were turned inward against the wall. The little cat is dead. So the song went, shall I be raised from death? The spirit asks, and the sun says, yes. And the desert answers, your voice is sand scattered in the wind. All Hallows, even now this landscape is assembling. The hills darken, the oxen sleep in their blue yoke, the fields having been picked clean, the sheaves bound evenly and piled at the roadside among cinquefoil as the toothed moon rises. This is the barrenness of harvest or pestilence. And the wife leaning out the window with her hand extended as in payment, and the seeds distinct gold calling, come here, little one. And the soul creeps out of the tree. Anniversary. Well, November's hit Paris again. The Times records a mean temperature of 38. Bunched about the Maryland flower sellers ostrich the future with their noses rigorously immersed in stale roses, or so I remember. Incredibly, it was the 21st last week, and my affections turned out limber after all. Oh, Stephen, we'd have been married now. I've still got our china, some broken and some linen. But the first I've really thought of you for months was just tonight, with my fork suspended. I was saying how much I loved New York. Autumn. The part of life devoted to contemplation was at odds with the part committed to action. Fall was approaching, but I remember it was always approaching once school ended. Life, my sister said, is like a torch, passed now from the body to the mind. Sadly, she went on, the mind is not there to receive it. The sun was setting. Ah, the torch, she said, it has gone out. I believe our best hope is that it's flickering. For da, like little Ernst throwing his toy over the side of the crib and then pulling it back. It's too bad, she said, there are no children here. We could learn from them, as Freud did. We would sometimes sit on benches outside the dining room, the smell of leaves burning. Old people and fire, she said, not a good thing. They burn their houses down. How heavy my mind is filled with the past. Is there enough room for the world to penetrate? It must go somewhere. It cannot simply sit on the surface. Stars gleaming over the water. The leaves piled, waiting to be lit. Insight, my sister said. Now it is here, but hard to see in the darkness. You must find your footing before you put your weight on it. Nocturne. My mother died last night. Mother, who never dies. Winter was in the air. Many months away, but in the air, nevertheless. It was the 10th of May. Hyacinth and apple blossom bloomed in the back garden. We could hear Maria singing songs from Czechoslovakia. How alone I am, songs of that kind. How alone I am, no mother, no father. My brain seemed so empty without them. Aromas drifted out of the earth. The dishes were in the sink, rinsed but not stacked. Under the full moon, Maria was folding the washing. The stiff sheets became dry, white rectangles of moonlight. How alone I am, but in music my desolation is my rejoicing. It was the 10th of May, as it had been the 9th, the 8th. Mother slept in her bed, her arms outstretched, her head balanced between them.
Parable of the Swans. On a small lake off the map of the world, 2 swans lived. As swans, they spent 80% of the day studying themselves in the attentive water, and 20% ministering to the beloved other. Thus, their fame as lovers stems chiefly from narcissism, which leaves so little leisure for more general cruising. But fate had other plans. After 10 years, they hit slimy water. Whatever the filth was, it clung to the male's plumage, which turned instantly gray. Simultaneously, the true purpose of his neck's flexible design revealed itself. So much action on the flat lake. So much he's missed. Sooner or later in a long life together, every couple encounters some emergency like this, some drama which results in harm. This occurs for a reason: to test love and to demand fresh articulation of its complex terms. So it came to light that the male and the female flew under different banners. Whereas the male believed that love was what one felt in one's heart, the female believed love was what one did. But this is not a little story about the male's inherent corruption, using as evidence the swan's sleazy definition of purity. It is a story of guile and innocence. For 10 years, the female studied the male. She dallied when he slept or when he was conveniently absorbed in the water, while the spontaneous male acted casually, on the whim of the moment. On the muddy water, they bickered a while in the fading light until the bickering grew slowly abstract, becoming part of their song. After a little longer, the silver lily. The nights have grown cool again, like the nights of early spring, and quiet again. Will speech disturb you? We're alone now. We have no reason for silence. Can you see over the garden the full moon rises? I won't see the next full moon. In spring, when the moon rose, it meant time was endless. Snowdrops opened and closed. The clustered seeds of the maples fell in pale drifts. White over white, the moon rose over the birch tree. And in the crook where the tree divides, leaves of the first daffodils in the moonlight, soft greenish silver. We have come too far together toward the end now to fear the end. These nights, I am no longer even certain I know what the end means. And you, who've been with a man, after the first cries, doesn't joy, like fear, make no sound? Vespers, in your extended absence, you permit me. In your extended absence, you permit me use of earth, anticipating some return on investment. I must report failure in my first assignment, principally regarding the tomato plants. I think I should not be encouraged to grow tomatoes. Or if I am, you should withhold the heavy rains, the cold nights that come so often here, while other regions get 12 weeks of summer. All this belongs to you. On the other hand, I planted the seeds. I watched the first shoots like wings tearing the soil. And it was my heart broken by the blight, the black spot so quickly multiplying in the rows. I doubt you have a heart, in our understanding of that term. You who do not discriminate between the dead and the living, who are, in consequence, immune to foreshadowing, you may not know how much terror we bear. The spotted leaf, the red leaves of the maple falling, even in August, in early darkness. I am responsible for these vines. Vita Nova. You saved me. You should remember me. The spring of the year. Young men buying tickets for the ferry boats. Laughter because the air is full of apple blossoms. When I woke up, I realized I was capable of the same feeling. I remember sounds like that from my childhood. Laughter for no cause, simply because the world is beautiful. Something like that. Lugano, tables under the apple trees, deckhands raising and lowering the colored flags. And by the lake's edge, a young man throws his hat into the water. Perhaps his sweetheart has accepted him. Crucial sounds or gestures like a track laid down before the larger themes, and then unused, buried. Islands in the distance, my mother holding out a plate of little cakes. As far as I remember, changed in no detail. The moment vivid, intact, having never been exposed to light, so that I woke elated, at my age, hungry for life, utterly confident. By the tables, patches of new grass, the pale green pieced into the dark, existing ground. Surely spring has been returned to me, this time not as a lover, but a messenger of death. Yet it is still spring. It is still meant tenderly. Fernanda Liba, 1904. Dearest love, the roses are in bloom again, cream and rose to either side of the brick walk. I pass among them with my white umbrella as the sun beats down upon the oval plots like pools in the grass, willows in the grove of statuary. So the days go by, fine days. I take my tea beneath the elm, half turned, as though you were beside me saying, flowers that could take your breath away. And always on the tray a rose, and always the sun branded on the river, and the men in summer suits in linen, and the girls, their skirts circled in shadow. Last night, I dreamed that you did not return. Today is fair. The little maid filled a silver bowl shaped like a swan with roses for my bedside, with the dark red they call brennende Liebe, which I find so beautiful.
Love poem. There is always something to be made of pain. Your mother knits. She turns out scarves in every shade of red. They were for Christmas, and they kept you warm while she married over and over, taking you along. How could it work? When all those years she stored her widowed heart as though the dead come back. No wonder you are the way you are, afraid of blood. Your women like one brick wall after another. Baskets. It is a good thing in the marketplace, the old woman trying to decide among the lettuces, impartial, weighing the heads, examining the outer leaves, even sniffing them to catch a scent of earth of which on one head some trace remains, not the substance, but the residue. So she prefers it to the other more estranged heads, it being freshest. Nodding briskly at the vendor's wife, she makes this preference known. An old woman, yet vigorous in judgment. 2. The circle of the world in its midst. A dog sits at the edge of the fountain. The children playing there, coming and going from the village, pause to greet him. The impulsive, losing interest to play. In the little village of sticks adorned with blue fragments of pottery, they squat beside the dog who stretches in the hot dust. Arrows of sunlight dance around him. Now in the field beyond, some great event is ending. In 2s and 3s, boldly swinging their shirts, the athletes stroll away, scattering red and blue and dazzling purple over the plain ground, over the trivial surface. 3. Lord, who gave me my solitude, I watched the sun descending in the marketplace, the stalls empty, the remaining children bicker at the fountain. But even at night, when it can't be seen, the flame of the sun still heats the pavements. That's why on earth so much life sprung up, because the sun maintains steady warmth in its periphery. Does this suggest your meaning that the game resumes in the dust beneath the infant god of the fountain? There is nothing fixed. There is no assurance of death. 4. I take my basket to the brazen market, to the gathering place. I ask you, how much beauty can a person bear? It is heavier than ugliness. Even the burden of emptiness is nothing beside it. Crates of eggs, papaya, sacks of yellow lemons. And I am not a strong woman. It isn't easy to want so much, to walk with such a heavy basket, either bent reed or willow. Marathon. 1. Last letter. Weeping, standing still, then going out again into the garden. In the field, white heads of dandelions making rows of saints, now bending, now stiff with awe. And at the edge, a hare, his eyes fixed, terrified. Silence, herds of bells. Without thinking, I knelt in the grass like someone meaning to pray. When I tried to stand again, I couldn't move. My legs were utterly rigid. Does grief change you like that? Through the birches, I could see the pond. The sun was cutting small white holes in the water. I got up finally. I walked down to the pond. I stood there, brushing the grass from my skirt, watching myself like a girl after her first lover, turning slowly at the bathroom mirror, naked, looking for a sign. But nakedness in women is always a pose. I was not transfigured. I would never be free. 2. Song of the River. Once again, we were happy. We had no memories. For all the repetition, nothing happened twice. We were always walking parallel to a river with no sense of progression. Though the trees across from us were sometimes birch, sometimes cypress, the sky was blue, a matrix of blue glass. While in the river, things were going by. A few leaves, a child's boat painted red and white, its sails stained by the water. As they passed on the surface, we could see ourselves, or seemed to drift apart and together as the river linked us forever. Though up ahead were other couples choosing souvenirs. 3. The encounter. You came to the side of the bed and sat staring at me. And then you kissed me. I felt hot wax on my forehead. I wanted it to leave a mark. That's how I knew I loved you. Because I wanted to be burned, stamped, to have something in the end. I drew the gown over my head. A red flush covered my face and shoulders. It will run its course, the course of fire, setting a gold coin on my forehead between the eyes. You lay beside me. Your hand moved over my face as though you had felt it also. You must have known then how I wanted you. We will always know that, you and I. The proof will be on my body. 4. A song of obstacles. When my lover touches me, what I feel in my body is like the first movement of a glacier over the earth. As the ice shifts, dislodging great boulders, hills of solemn rock, so in the forest, the uprooted trees become a sea of disconnected limbs. And where there are cities, these dissolve too. The sighing gardens, all the young girls eating chocolates in the courtyard, slowly scattering the colored foil, and then where the city was, the ore, the unearthed mysteries. So I see the ice is more powerful than rock, than mere resistance. Then for us, in its path, time doesn't pass, not even an hour. Night Song 5. Look up into the light of the lantern. Don't you see the calm of darkness in the horror of heaven? We've been apart too long, too painfully separated. How can you bear to dream, to give up watching? I think you must be dreaming. Your face is full of mild expectancy. I need to wake you, to remind you that there isn't a future. That's why we're free. And now some weakness in me has been cured forever. So I'm not compelled to close my eyes, to go back, to rectify. The beach is still The sea cleansed of its superfluous life, opaque, rock-like, in mounds, in vegetal clusters. Seabirds sleep in the jetty, terns, assassins. You're tired. I can see that. We're both tired. We have acted a great drama. Even our hands are cold, that were like kindling. Our clothes are scattered in the sand. Strangely enough, they never turn to ashes. I have to tell you what I've learned, that I know now what happened to the dreamers. They don't feel it when they change. One day they wake, they dress, they are old. Tonight I'm not afraid to feel the revolutions. How can you want sleep when passion gives you that peace? You're like me tonight, one of the lucky ones. You'll get what you want. You'll get your oblivion. Adult grief. Because you were foolish enough to love one place, now you are homeless. An orphan, in a succession of shelters. You did not prepare yourself sufficiently. Before your eyes, 2 people were becoming old. I could have told you 2 deaths were coming. There has never been a parent kept alive by a child's love. Now, of course, it is too late. You were trapped in the romance of fidelity. You kept going back, clinging to 2 people you hardly recognized after what they'd endured. If once you could have saved yourself, now the time's passed. You were obstinate, pathetically blind to change, and now you have nothing. For you, home is a cemetery. I've seen you press your face against the granite markers. You are the lichen trying to grow there. But you will not grow. You will not let yourself liberate anything. The mountain. My students look at me expectantly. I explain to them that the life of art is a life of endless labor. Their expressions hardly change. They need to know a little more about endless labor. So I tell them about the story of Sisyphus, how he was doomed to push a rock up a mountain, knowing nothing would come of this effort, but that he would repeat it indefinitely. I tell them there is joy in this, in the artist's life, that one clutches, that one eludes judgment. And as I speak, I am secretly pushing a rock myself, slyly pushing it up the steep face of a mountain. Why do I lie to these children? They aren't listening. They aren't deceived. Their fingers tapping at the wooden desks. So I retract the myth. I tell them it occurs in hell, and that the artist lies because he is obsessed with attainment, that he perceives the summit as that place where he will live forever, a place about to be transformed by his burden. With every breath, I am standing at the top of the mountain. Both my hands are free, and the rock has added height to the mountain.
The embrace. She taught him the gods. Was it teaching? He went on hating them, but in the long evenings of obsessive talk, as he listened, they became real. Not that they changed. They never came to seem innately human. In the firelight, he watched her face, but she would not be touched. She had rejected the original need. Then in the darkness, he would lead her back, above the trees, the city rose in a kind of splendor as all that is wild comes to the surface. Summer. Remember the days of our first happiness? How strong we were, how dazed by passion, lying all day, then all night in the narrow bed, sleeping there, eating there too. It was summer. It seemed everything had ripened at once. And so hot, we lay completely uncovered. Sometimes the wind rose. A willow brushed the window. But we were lost in a way. Didn't you feel that? The bed was like a raft. I felt us drifting, far from our natures, toward a place where we'd discovered nothing. First the sun, then the moon, in fragments, shone through the willow. Things anyone could see. Then the circles closed. Slowly the nights grew cool. The pendant leaves of the willow yellowed and fell. And in each of us began a deep isolation, though we never spoke of this, of the absence of regret. We were artists again, my husband. We could resume the journey. The empty glass. I asked for much. I received much. I asked for much. I received little. I received next to nothing. And between, a few umbrellas opened indoors, a pair of shoes by mistake on the kitchen table. Oh, wrong, wrong. It was my nature. I was hard-hearted, remote. I was selfish, rigid to the point of tyranny. But I was always that person, even in early childhood. Small, dark-haired, dreaded by the other children. I never changed. Inside the glass, the abstract tide of fortune turned from high to low overnight. Was it the sea responding maybe to celestial force? To be safe, I prayed. I tried to be a better person. Soon it seemed to me that what began as terror and matured into moral narcissism might have become, in fact, actual human growth. Maybe this is what my friends meant, taking my hand, telling me they understood the abuse, the incredible shit I accepted, implying, so I once thought, I was a little sick to give so much for so little. Whereas they meant I was good, clasping my hand intensely, a good friend in person, not a creature of pathos. I was not pathetic. I was writ large, like a queen or a saint. Well, it all makes for interesting conjecture. And it occurs to me that what is crucial is to believe in effort, to believe some good will come of simply trying, a good completely untainted by the corrupt initiating impulse to persuade or seduce. What are we without this? Whirling in the dark universe, alone, afraid, unable to influence fate. What do we have really? Sad tricks with ladders and shoes, tricks with salt, impurely motivated, recurring attempts to build character. What do we have to appease the great forces? And I think, in the end, this was the question that destroyed Agamemnon there on the beach, the Greek ships at the ready, the sea invisible beyond the serene harbor, the future lethal, unstable. He was a fool thinking it could be controlled. He should have said, I have nothing. I am at your mercy. End of winter. Over the still world, a bird calls, waking solitary among black boughs. You wanted to be born. I let you be born. When has my grief ever gotten in the way of your pleasure? Plunging ahead into the dark and light at the same time, eager for sensation, as though you were some new thing wanting to express yourselves. All brilliance, all vivacity, never thinking this would cost you anything, never imagining the sound of my voice as anything but part of you. You won't hear it in the other world, not clearly again, not in bird call or human cry, not the clear sound, only persistent echoing. In all sound, that means goodbye, goodbye, the one continuous line that binds us to each other. The evening star. Tonight, for the first time in many years, there appeared to me again a vision of the earth's splendor. In the evening sky, the first star seemed to increase in brilliance as the earth darkened, until at last it could grow no darker. And the light, which was the light of death, seemed to restore to earth its power to console. There were no other stars, only the one whose name I knew. As in my other life, I did her injury. Venus, star of the early evening. To you, I dedicate my vision, since on this blank surface, you have cast enough light to make my thought visible again.
Thank you all for your outstanding readings. Why don't we all come on the screen and if we may, Jennifer, each take a minute to go around the horn, starting with Bob, and then Helen, Corinne, Kay, and Ruthie to say a word or two about the show.
Yeah. Thank you, Harry. And I'm going to make mine a minute, and then I'm going to have to leave. So please, everyone else, don't think I'm rude and don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm always just so honored and humbled to be on one of these sessions with these four beautiful reading voices. They're just stunning, and they do such great service to Louise Glück's poetry. I don't think she wrote them with a Philadelphia twang and male Philadelphia twang in mind, but so be it. Someone once said about Louise Glück's poetry, where is that quote? She is at heart the poet of a fallen world. And, there is such bleakness and at times alienation, austerity in her poetry, but it's so joyful. Her use of language, plain language, is just brings to create feeling and images is so joyful to me. She's just such an accomplished poet, using ordinary speech, very accessible, but very emotionally powerful at the same time. So thank you all.
Thank you, Bob. Helen?
This is a wonderful poet. She's so alive. It gives the reader such material to express. She has profound ideas, but expresses it with such brevity, like her line when her mother died, and she says, "Mother who never dies." There's so much in one line, and I am so happy to become acquainted with her poems, and it was a joy for me to read.
Corinne?
Yes, I agree, Helen. I think Louise Glück has got to all of us. And although, as Bob Beitcher said, that she wrote about a lot of bleakness, it still is. she had such energy and such delight in the earth and in the sky and in loving thoughts and what have you, that it isn't bleak. I mean, you agree with her that things are rough, but she always comes out with a glowing feeling of life behind everything.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I loved her poems. I loved them. I was a little distracted by by my physical things here, but I want to read them more and more. And they're very touching, and they're beautiful, and what a great poet she is. I just love her.
Ruthie?
Thank you so much. Wow, I really was touched by her poetry too. I felt like she turned us inside out. She took all the stuff inside of us and pulled it out so that we could see it. And it was almost as though like she was a person of such great, deep spiritual insight of the feelings that people have that are unseen by those that are not as sensitive. But she was very sensitive. And so it was like she really exposed the raw feelings that people have who do have great spiritual understanding, you know, being in a sense isolated from it's almost as though it made me think how God must be experiencing us and wondering why we're not paying attention. So, you know, and yet she was like, don't they see? You know. Anyway, it was very interesting. I loved it.
Well, in terms of what you just said, Ruthie, she says in that one poem, The Empty Glass, I have nothing, I am at your mercy. I mean, she takes us through all the feelings and through our lifetime, all these situations we go through. And she's elegiac, she's difficult at times, but she's always human all the time and very poignant. And so thank you, ladies, once again for such a marvelous reading. You all just touched my heart very much, and you're so eloquent, and you all understand the poetry, and you go deep and interpret them, you know, marvelously. So thank you. And finally, I will just say, next Tuesday, we have two terrific poets, Jim Natal and Peggy DeBreer. So thank you all. Bob Beitcher, Helen Richman, Corinne Conley, Kay Weissman, and Ruth Elliott. And here's Jennifer Clymer to take us home.
Thank you all so much. What a celebration of life and artistry for Louise. You guys did a beautiful job, and you did her proud.